Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to my Origin-SMP series, where I play an Origin you suggest for one entire day. Today I played the Wyverns, but before we get into everything, I have a few things I need to say first. If you enjoy this video, it would be a massive help to me to hit that like and subscribe button. This series is pretty much exclusively fueled by the community, so it's really great feedback for me to see how many people are interested in the content I'm making and if I should continue making the series. Secondly, I wanted to thank everyone who has commented on my previous videos suggesting new Origins for me to try. Moving forward, however, I will not be taking suggestions from the comments. Instead, I'll be going over the suggestions by most popular votes on my Origin straw polls. A straw poll lets you, the viewer, see how popular certain Origins are compared to others. I had a few people comment on how they've been commenting about Piglin, for example, and I still have never made a video on it. The reason for that is, if you look at the straw poll, it's pretty unpopular compared to the other Origins. So starting from now, there will be a pinned comment in the description of every video with a new link to a straw poll. Another very important thing to note, if you don't see an Origin that you want me to play on the list, it means I've already played it or it doesn't exist in the base game of the mod pack I play on. I've played almost 10 of the base game Origins so far, so chances are if it's not on the straw poll, I've already made a video on it, or that Origin is coming in a new video very, very soon. If you're a subscriber to this channel, you already know this, but chances are you're not. That being said, it's likely you're unfamiliar with what mod pack I'm playing. I'm playing with the Origin-SMP mod pack from the CurseForge launcher. This mod pack has many exciting races to explore, along with 14 different classes to choose from that benefit your race in different ways. If you have no idea what I just said and you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. Feel free to check out my other tier list videos on the mod pack, the links will be in the description, and there should also be cards on screen throughout the video. In this series, I don't plan on beating the game. I just want to take my time and learn about the race in my own single player world. I played the Wyvern for a day, and this is what I learned. Let's start with the Wyvern's passive called Nether Inhabitant. This passive basically makes it so when you load up in the world for the first time, you spawn in the Nether. In the mod pack I play on, there's Better Nether, which is another mod, so there's lots of structures, mobs, and resources for you to loot throughout your time in the Nether. That being said, if the Nether's not for you, you can always leave through a ruined Nether portal. These portals are scattered throughout the Nether and usually have a chest with the materials to fix up the portal and teleport to the overworld. If you want to know more about how to survive in the Nether, if you're playing a Nether-based Origin, I go into a bit more detail in my Blazeborn video I did a few weeks back. Feel free to check out that video if you're not familiar with how spawning in the Nether works for the Origins mod. The Wyvern's next passive is Carnivore. Understandably, this passive makes it so the Wyvern can only eat meat. This actually does include rotten flesh and spider eyes, and since real meat like steaks, pork chops, or mutton are pretty difficult to come by in the Nether, your main way to sustain yourself will be killing zombie piglin for rotten flesh to start out. There's going to be other alternatives to survive the Nether, of course, but before you find a ruined portal to head back to the overworld, this is probably going to be your best bet for food. Unfortunately, for the end game, the Carnivore passive means you can't eat golden food, which is considered by most as a massive downside, especially for PvP and multiplayer gameplay. I didn't personally find it a huge issue in single player, but you may find this less tolerable during your own playthrough. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the Wyvern. Well, I guess just the meat, since the Wyvern can't actually eat potatoes, but you know what I mean. The Fireball is probably the most notable signature ability of this Origin. It has a few interesting mechanics, and I did loads of testing with it just to get the exact numbers. But if you know an interesting trick that I didn't get to in this video or this part about the Fireball, make sure to leave it in the comments below. I'd love to read it. The Wyvern's Fireball, if shot at a block, it acts as a flint and steel. You can activate nether portals with it or light the ground on fire if you're in combat. That's just a very basic mechanic of how it operates. But most likely you're here and you're trying to use the Fireball for combat rather than like flint and steel. So let's get into something a little more relevant. The Fireball has two phases of damage. The first phase is the initial hit, which does 5 damage to a regular character, or 2.5 hearts. The second phase is the damage over time burn effect you get from the Fireball, which does an additional 4 damage, or 2 hearts. The Fireball is on a short enough cooldown that you can fire another one at your enemies before the first one even finishes burning. This allows Wyverns to do constant damage over time, in addition to their other attacks with a sword or whatever you may be using. This Fireball ability is also unhindered by the shield, which means you can sit in a corner and block while shooting fireballs as much as you want. You can also swing your sword and shoot a fireball at the same time, so it basically has the best of both worlds for any form of combat, single player or multiplayer. Enemies also still take damage if they're in water. So if your target's in water that you're shooting at, they still take the initial 5 damage from the first hit of the fireball, but obviously they don't burn when they're in water, so that whole second part of the burning effect doesn't apply. There are numerous Origins that are very weak to fire. So if you're a snowman or you play as a Florin, or really anything that takes extra damage from fire, you really need to pay attention. Florins take double damage from the fireball ability. This means they take 10 damage instead of 5 from the initial hit, and 8 damage over time instead of 4 with the burning effect. It's not actually enough to one-shot them, but I'm sure as you can see, the ability can shred certain Origins in particular. Another Origin from the base game that suffers from the same thing is the Snowman. These guys actually take 3 times the damage from this ability. The initial hit does 15 damage, and they take 12 damage over time from the burning effect. The Fireball ability can one-shot a snowman in iron armor or below. 1 fireball, 1 death. If you're an Origin who's weak to fire, you need to stay out of the Wyvern's way, because they're literally just 1 fireball away from killing you. Let's look at the flip side. If you're playing as an Origin that resists fire, or you're just trying to kill a magma cube or something in the nether, this ability doesn't even scratch. The fireball actually goes completely through you, and you take no damage whatsoever. It is utterly useless against anything that can resist fire, which brings me to my next point. Snowman and Florin, listen up, because if you have a fire resistance potion, the same effect will happen to you. In the clip you're seeing on screen right now, you're looking at a snowman with 3 minutes of fire resistance. The snowman is completely immune to the Wyvern's fireball ability in every way imaginable. On that note, let's move on to the next passive of the Wyvern, Fire Immunity. As I'm sure you can infer from what I just said, Wyverns actually can't touch other Wyverns with their fireball abilities, or anything with the Fire Immunity passive. When my friend and I tested out the combat, he actually sent me a screenshot and said I had a fire particle trail when I was walking around. So I would assume that's from this passive. This is just something nice, and it helps other Origins tell from a distance which characters are fire-based Origins, so it can be used to help Snowman or Florins keep their distance from something that maybe does a lot of damage with fire. Obviously, the Fire Immunity passive means you're immune to fire. However, it has a downside to it. Fire Immunity also entitles that you take extra damage from snowballs. Snowballs do 3 damage to a Wyvern normally, and if thrown by a snowman, the snowball does a whopping 7 damage. However, unlike the Blazeborn, the Wyverns don't actually take damage from splash water bottles or water bottles in general. I don't know why the Blazeborn take damage from water bottles and splash water bottles, and the Wyverns don't. So if you know, make sure to let me know in the comments below and let everyone else know, because I have no idea why it does this. Last but not least, we have the Hydrophobia passive. Naturally, as a fire-based Origin, you're going to be weak to water. This includes rain and water. So settling in the desert is a good option, but settling in the tundra, ironically, is even better. Both the desert and tundra have no rain, which is great. But if you didn't know, snow actually doesn't hurt Origins with Hydrophobia. So while the desert still has water in little pools or rivers, in the tundra, all the water is completely frozen over, which can prevent you from taking damage if you accidentally fall in. So, I played the Wyvern for a day, and that is what I learned. Did I miss anything? Be sure to comment down below if I missed any tips or tricks with the Wyvern that you may have found. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you did, it would mean a lot if you subscribed and hit that like button. Is there a specific Origin you'd like to see me try out next? Make sure to vote in the straw poll below, and you can see if the Origin you vote for will be in my next video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.